The prayer and the pledge tonight will be led by Councilman David Edwards. Mr. Edwards.
Bow with me as we pray. Kind and merciful Heavenly Father, we all thank you for the protection that was provided to so many in our community during the tornado. Our hearts break for the families that experience loss and are suffering. And Lord, we ask that you would make all the families in our community whole again that have suffered in any way from this disaster. Lord, be with the council tonight and the staff of the city of Murfreesboro as we attempt to legislate and to make prudent decisions with the funds and the trust that the citizens of this community have placed us over. We thank you for your mercy, and it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Stand as we say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome to the Murfreesboro City Council meeting, April the 23rd, 2009. Mayor Bragg is out tonight, and he is in, I understand, New York City and celebrating the birth of his first grandchild. I understand it's a little red-headed girl that weighs about, they said, 6 pounds and 14 ounces. Her name is Elizabeth Jenny. So I understand the baby and the mother and the father are doing well, and the grandparents are weak, but they are recovering. So our thoughts are with them, and as they celebrate that. Couple announcements. Earth Day celebration is Saturday at 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. It'll be out on the City Civic Plaza. There'll be free hot dogs, popcorn, drinks, and games, and other kid-specific activities, balloons, brochures, free trees, and different activities. So I encourage everyone this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on the Civic Plaza for Earth Day. Council members, first item on the agenda is our consent agenda. You have that in your package, and if there's anything you'd like to discuss from the consent agenda, we can do that at this time. If not, I will entertain a motion. There's been one item been withdrawn on the consent agenda. Item EA has been withdrawn from the consent agenda, so please note that.
Vice Mayor, with that notation, I would move for adoption of the consent agenda.
Second. Motion and second. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Gelly?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher?
Aye. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Haley and others to give us a little update or update on the tornado progress, and if you would at this time, please.
Vice Mayor Bratcher and council members, we have provided you with some information that we believe will be helping to understand the magnitude of the tornado on Good Friday, the 10th of this month. But before I go into the statistical data, I know all of us, the first thing that needs to be recognized is the fact that, as mentioned earlier in the prayer, there are those that have suffered loss, there are those that have suffered injury, there are those that have suffered through the destruction and or damage of their homes. To all of those, certainly our feelings and best wishes go forth. The manner in which the preceding really moments after this tornado touched down to the west of the city in the county and then came through the city are and to some degree overwhelming at the speed in which things, normal lives, the disruption of things happened, but that's Mother Nature, and we all realize that a higher being is always in charge. Having said that, within moments of the tornado touching down and passing through the community, I received a phone call from Mr. Lyons. I was on my way to Kentucky for a long weekend, and Mr. Lyons quickly described to me as best he understood the damage at that particular moment, and we realized quickly that a disaster had happened in the community. And my first thought was to turn around and come back. My second thought, just a moment later, was that your department heads had worked diligently over several years in developing plans, disaster plans for such an event. Not only this type of event, but for other disasters. And through Mr. Lyons' leadership, the department head's leadership, that plan was implemented, and I think most of you had an opportunity early on to visit the Emergency Operations Center in the basement at the police department and know firsthand the calmness, the manner in which, again, your department heads begin the process of addressing the needs of the citizens of this community. The employees, and I'm going to, when you start talking about other departments, you don't want to leave any out, and certainly I don't. But the list of departments that were involved in this monumental effort also have been provided to you. They are contained on a form that the city had to provide to FEMA yesterday, and not in any order of degree of services provided, but in an effort not to overlook anyone, as they are listed on that report. The Urban Environmental Department, Engineering Department, Street Department, Solid Waste Department, Parks and Recreations, Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Department, Old Fort Golf Course, Street Department, Parks and Recreation, Greenway damages, Fleet Services, Murfreesboro Electric Department, Solid Waste, Fire Department, Cable TV Department, Building and Codes, the Personnel Department, Public Transportation, Police Department, all of those, and that's virtually every department of this city, and their employees put forth an effort that has been recognized by citizens that were directly affected. It has been recognized by FEMA representatives, and I guess it was Tuesday morning. I had an occasion to talk to a retired FEMA regional director who now resides in Murfreesboro, and told me that in his 27 years experience responding to emergencies and disasters in the southeastern United States, and that was the area that he said he was in his whole time with FEMA, that never had he witnessed, seen, observed a better, faster, more organized, controlled response by a local government than he did with this incident. And by the way, his home is one that received some damage. It wasn't destroyed, but received some damage. The number of hours, the way, again, your employees and your department heads directed that effort has been recognized from those outside the community that have moved here, as well as those that have lived here all their lives and observed, seen, heard of how things have been handled in other areas and observed how they were handled here. The long days, to back up just a moment, your fire department completed a review, a screening of the damaged areas, the homes in those areas, in a matter of hours. In fact, they had finished the inspection looking for injured or individuals who needed assistance hours before the state folks showed up to say that one of the first things that needed to happen was a review of the areas to see if they were injured or those that needed help. That had already been done hours earlier. And the state couldn't believe that it had been finished in such a timely fashion. Your police department, they had all days off were canceled, vacations were canceled. Your police department employees worked 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week, in order to give the citizens in the affected area the assurance that security was being provided. And again, and I'm satisfied you've heard this from those that lived in the affected areas, that they laid down the first night fearful. But knowing the police was present, knowing the police was making its rounds, they felt protected. The second night on, most of the neighborhoods, those that I talked to said that they felt comfortable, even with the lights out at night. And again, the security that your police department provided was second to none. The solid waste department, and one of the figures that Mr. Lyons has tracked this, as well as all of these figures from day one, but the debris removal through April the 13th has been 21 million pounds of yard waste and building debris that's been picked up, hauled off, and disposed of in just the first few days. Your solid waste department, they've gone far beyond anything that could have been expected of them and could have been performed. You remember several years ago we came to you in an effort to add more knuckle booms to the community. At that time, just to be able to respond and cover the city once a week with yard waste pickup. With the number of vehicles and personnel that you provided, we had the equipment in place, we had the manpower in place, not to do it all, but to do a monumental task in removal of that debris. The number of contractors, there's so many unsung heroes in this episode. The contractors of the community, if they had backhoes, pickup trucks, dump trucks, forklifts, track hose, they were contacted by the engineering department, street department, and they came without having any contracts, without having any documentation that other than the belief in this city that once their services were rendered according to city code and FEMA standards, they would be reimbursed, because they didn't know how long they were going to be needed, they didn't know what all was going to be involved, and they came without hesitation. Vice Mayor and council members, just to give you some specifics, the storm itself ran a path of 23.5 miles, was approximately a half mile at its widest point. About 18,000 Murfreesboro Electric customers were without power, and the power was restored quicker than anybody really thought it could be. It probably would have been installed a little bit quicker if we had not had hardly as many folks that were just trying to get into the area just to see what was going on. That was a little bit of a problem. The storm itself originally was classified as an F3. That was updated to an F4 storm. Again, the emergency response through the operations center in the police department. I can't say enough for how smooth that went. Again, y'all saw it firsthand. The multi-agency cooperation, the Tennessee Highway Patrol, the Sheriff's Department, other governmental entities. I received a call from the city manager of Smyrna, who was on his way to Atlanta within 15 minutes after Mr. Lyons had called me, and Mr. O'Neill was already south of Chattanooga. Heard it on the radio, called me to see what they could do, and within, I think, about an hour, they had equipment, manpower, and trucks here without, again, any hesitation. The private contractors, we used over 15 private contractors to assist in this operation. The community volunteers, the church organizations, civic organizations that provided assistance in so many ways certainly helped to provide the needed services immediately, the food, the water, and sometimes it was just a hug and a reassurance to those that had been hurt. The restoration of the essential functions of the city, the electric, again, how quickly it was put back in place. The water department lost some power, had to get generators up and running to get water service back in place. As far as damage goes, there were in the city 81 homes that were totally destroyed, 196 that received major damage, and approximately 500 more that had damage to some degree, for about 802 homes all told. The current estimate of damage in the city and county is just above $41 million. I failed to mention Nashville, the Red Cross. They responded. Nashville responded with manpower and equipment. Certainly, the Red Cross mobilized the emergency shelter at New Vision Baptist Church for those that needed that assistance. And Mayor and council members, again, the employees of this city, the department, the leadership of the department heads, the leadership that Mr. Lyons provided. Hopefully we'll never need it again, but if anybody, if we do, hopefully it'll be a comfort to know that that it was done once in such a fashion, and I'm satisfied it would be done again in such a fashion if needed. That's
a good report. It's a lot of information. I know that I think we're all just, it was a remarkable response. I think it was a textbook response, and that's what I'm hearing from the citizens. A lot of people were just amazed and really appreciated how the city of Murfreesboro, with the leadership of Mr. Lyons and others. I know that Ron with Middle Tennessee Electric done a great job of restoring power in the areas that they were in, and I know our telecommunicators, they're kind of on the back. They're not out in the visible scene, but they've done a great job. I think they answered 800 or 900 calls within a short period of time, and they've done a tremendous job of keeping people calm, and so it's really heartwarming to see how the neighbors came out and worked with each other and checking on neighbors and strangers stopping by to see if anyone needed assistance. And I guess in all the panic and the confusion, it was heartwarming to see how people in Murfreesboro responded in that adversity. And our employees done a remarkable job. I don't think we can tell them how much we appreciate it. I know the citizens have really told us. I know we've all heard that, how much they appreciate all the employees and all the efforts everyone put out in the long hours. I know, council members, you may have some comments or questions.
You know, the comment, Vice Mayor, that I hear over and over in the community since the Good Friday tornado is what an exemplary job the leadership of the city exhibited and demonstrated to the department heads, and then how it translated down. And having spent a fair number of hours in the proximity of Rob Lyons during that time, I felt like I was watching what the invasion at Normandy Beach might have looked like 60-some years ago, with the exception of landing in the right place at the right time. And the comment that I heard from the public that seemed to sum up my sentiment as well was, it was as though someone had called earlier that day and told us there was going to be a tornado and to get ready, and that we had the people and the machines and the trucks all parked on the edge of that part of town waiting for the tornado to finish, and then we swung into action. I can't tell you how proud I am of Rob and of all the men and women of our community that work for Murfreesboro City and make this such a great place.
I agree, Mr. Davis. I know Ms. McGannon also was at every meeting, and she put a lot of long hours in. We appreciate her going above and beyond her call and her job duties recognition. So thank you very much for that. Toby, you've got some comments?
I just wanted, Vice Mayor, again, to say thank you to all of the city staff for all the hard work that was put in. Oftentimes tragedies beget heroes, and we have an entire city full of heroes, and rising from that group of heroes is the leadership of Rob Lyons, and I appreciate that.
I live in the area that was hit. I'm only a couple hundred yards from where it went through off of Tomahawk Trace, and we were huddled up in our laundry room. I had just seen Rob probably an hour before the tornado had hit, and he'd said, "Hey, you need to watch out. There's some bad weather coming through." And so we huddled up in the laundry room and could feel the tornado go through. It's one of those things that you have that sick feeling in your stomach that you don't know what's going on outside, but you know it's not good. And probably 10 minutes after we just sort of hung out in the laundry room, I came out and I called Rob, and Rob answered the phone and said, he said, "I really don't know what's going on yet, but we've activated the OC, and we're in place." And so from that point, we went and started walking the neighborhood. And I think, with leadership and with our city staff and with our police department and fire department, 2 hours after this happened, there was already solid waste and knuckle boom trucks in our neighborhood picking up trees with the neighbors. But the one thing that just keeps coming back in my mind, a police officer named Mike Luzader was out on Battleground, and he had about 10 or 15 residents huddled around him. And this was probably 20 minutes after it had happened, and the police department or the fire department was handing some of the residents spray paint. And so we were walking door to door, and the residents who just came out to help each other, and that's one of the proudest things that I can say is that I don't know everyone in my neighborhood, but when something like this happens, predominantly what I heard through Saturday and Sunday, and when we were going through trying to help get the neighborhood cleaned up, is someone would just walk up and say, "Where do you need me? What can I help with?" And I was helping clean a yard with a gentleman who, and this is what tells you about the community, he lived in Victoria Park, and he was over helping a neighbor on Tomahawk Trace, and his house had gotten hit, and his thought was, "We got my house cleaned up, so I'm coming to help somebody else." Right. And so his house had not even been completely fixed yet, and he was already helping someone else. And so that's what I keep hearing through the neighborhood, is I think that's what the spirit of our residents, and that comes from the leadership that's conveyed. So well done all around.
Any other comments?
Vice Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I don't know if you want to do this now or not, but it's a continuation of, and it will. This would come up under other business, but this is a part of the storm effort, that paperwork that we need to take action on. Would you
Yeah, we can take that now if you like.
All right. And this was provided to you on your desk tonight. As you know, on Friday, April 10th, 2009, a major tornado struck the city, and city personnel responded immediately, massively, and magnificently. The mayor had declared an emergency at 2:05 p.m. Under the applicable federal laws and regulations, the governor has to submit the request for a federal disaster declaration. This request has to be based on both state and county specific projections of damage to personal property and to government property, as well as the government's cost of rescue and repair. Attached are the cost projections submitted by the city to TEMA to be made a part of the governor's request for a disaster declaration. The categories are those required by FEMA. The figures represent our best knowledge of cost incurred by the city and those projected to be incurred. Thus, it includes the invoices shown on the other attachment. We know that these figures will change. We know that not all the city's costs will be eligible for FEMA reimbursement. As an example, additional straight time work by city employees. We also know that FEMA will only reimburse a portion of the eligible cost. Even though these figures are these figures are qualified in this manner, I wanted you to have them. The governor submitted Tennessee's request for Rutherford County to be declared eligible for disaster relief on Tuesday, April the 21st, 2009, and we will keep you informed of those developments. Also attached is a list of the invoices received to date for emergency services rendered by non-city personnel for this type of emergency work. There will be additional invoices for additional work. Under Section 2-10 of the City Code, and a copy is attached, this report must be presented to you. Under the City Code, emergency purchases must not exceed $200,000, and they require the approval of the city manager or deputy and the mayor or vice mayor, and this has occurred. Because staff has not yet had adequate time for a thorough review of each invoice, I am recommending that only 75% of each emergency purchases bill be paid at this time. This will allow these firms to receive payment promptly for their efforts. The city also has had Rollins Excavating Company provide emergency services work. The majority of this work will be compensated under its existing annual maintenance contract with the city. There were some equipment items and overtime costs that were acquired as an emergency purchase. The amount not under the existing maintenance contract will not exceed $200,000. Council's authorization for staff to pay Rollins for the amounts have been allocated correctly to the normal contract and to the emergency response, with the total payment for work to date not to exceed $628,809. We've provided for you also a breakdown, a report that was provided to TEMA and FEMA yesterday that shows that incurred or known to date and then anticipated cost for the various departments under the A, B, C, D, E, F, and G categories total $6,455,698. This report, again, was furnished yesterday and will be used by the state and the governor in requesting that the state or at least the counties that were affected by this storm, will be declared disaster areas and will qualify for reimbursement through the normal FEMA process. Attached to, on the back of that, you will find a breakdown of the bills received as of April the 23rd from the 15 contractors that have supplied furnished equipment and manpower for this emergency relief, and that those bills total $461,238.68. The 75% that we are asking for approval to pay is $345,929.01. Again, under that shows the Rollins Excavating amount of $628,809, and their contract prices that we have with them will apply. Items purchased for emergency response not normally contracted for, such as overtime and other emergency equipment, will be reimbursed at an amount not to exceed $200,000. And that's the $200,000 that we mentioned, that is the limit in our city charter. All of these the majority of these contractors experienced 12, 13, 14-hour work days for several days. They experienced overtime expenses, and in order to give staff time to work through and see what of those overtime charges we should qualify, that we're only asking to pay 75% of these bills. A lot of these people, a lot of these companies have suffered through the downturn of the economy of the last 9 months to a year. They've got payrolls to meet, gas bills that they furnished, repair bills. I'd hate to guess it. I saw how many flat tires our fleet services department fixed on vehicles of the city. So I'm sure that these contractors experienced the same problems. But Vice Mayor Bratcher and Council, we would ask permission to be able to pay these bills according to this outline.
Council members, you've heard the recommendation to pay this 75%. Any questions or comments?
So moved.
Second.
Motion to second. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards?
Vice Mayor, the motion includes not just the 75%, but
Right.
the Rollins,
Correct.
correct?
The recommendation of the city manager.
Right, recommendation of city manager. Aye.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher?
Aye.
Vice Mayor, I started out saying, anytime you start listing folks, you're going to leave somebody out. Ms. McGannon has reminded me, and we can't say enough good things about the Rutherford County Emergency Management Agency. They were extremely helpful, beneficial through this whole process, and certainly I would not want to fail to mention them.
We'll be thanking people for months to come, and we appreciate everyone's hard work if we've missed you. Council members, next is the approval of the minutes held on April the 9th, 2009. You have a copy of those attached. If there's any additions or deletions, we will hear that this time. If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher?
Aye. Next, consider for passage on third and final reading an ordinance to annex an area located north of Joe B. Jackson Parkway and to adopt for same a plan of services.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher?
Aye. Next, consider for passage on third and final reading an ordinance to zone an area located north of Joe B. Jackson Parkway as light industrial LI district simultaneous with annexation.
Move it. Second.
Motion is second. Any questions? Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye. Next, consider for passage on third and final reading an ordinance to zone, to rezone approximately 20.28 acres from Boxwood Plantation Development south of Salem Pike to single-family residential 15, RS 15 district.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye. Next, consider for passage on third and final reading an ordinance to rezone an area located on the corner of East Sevier Street and South Highland Avenue to single-family residential 4, RS 4 district.
Move for passage.
Second.
Motion and second. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye. At this time, pursuant to Resolution 09-08-R-11, adopted by the City Council on March the 26th, 2009, we are to conduct a public hearing to consider annexation of approximately 5 acres located on the northwest corner of Halls Hill Pike and Twin Oaks Drive, and to adopt for same a plan of services. Helen Salisbury and Mitchell Bowman, applicant. The notice of the said public hearing was published in the April the 5th, 2009 issue of the local newspaper. Welcome, Ms. Seeley.
Thank you. Good evening, Vice Mayor Bratcher and council members. You have before you a request submitted to annex property located north of Halls Hill Pike and between Woods Edge Drive and Twin Oak Drive. This property includes one parcel, which is about 5 acres. It has one single-family house on the parcel as it is. The study area also includes 273 linear feet of Twin Oak Drive right-of-way. The applicant has also made a companion rezoning request, which will be the subject of the next public hearing and not of this public hearing. The subject property is contiguous with current city limits along 3 sides, along its northern, its western, and its southern lot lines. The property is also within the City of Murfreesboro's urban growth boundary. The City of Murfreesboro will be able to provide city services upon the effective date of annexation. I did want to point out to you that according to the plan of services, street lighting will not be installed along Halls Hill Pike until both sides of Halls Hill Pike are within the city limits. A neighborhood meeting was held regarding the annexation of this property on March 2nd, 2009 at the Discovery School. Staff was present at that meeting as well. All members of the Planning Commission were present for the public hearing that they held, and all members voted to recommend annexation of this property unanimously and the adoption of its plan of services. City Council should conduct a public hearing to consider the annexation of this property. A representative of the applicant, Mrs. Helen Salisbury, is the property owner. Her representative is Mr. Mitchell Bowman, and he's here this evening. If you have any questions regarding the annexation, he'll be glad to answer them for you, but he doesn't have a presentation prepared regarding the matter. If you have any questions from staff, we'll be glad to answer them either before or after the public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Seeley. Are there any
You're welcome.
questions from the council to Ms. Seeley before we open the public hearing? Thank you.
Sure.
Hearing none, at this time, we will open the public hearing, and we will ask those wishing to speak for or against this annexation request, please come to the microphone and give us your name and address. Anyone wishing to speak for or against? We will close the public hearing. Consider for passage on first reading an orders to annex an area located on the northwest corner of Halls Hill Pike and Twin Oak Drive to adopt for same a plan of services.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye. At this time, pursuant to Resolution 09-OZ-R-12, adopted by the City Council on March 26, 2009, we are to conduct a public hearing to consider zoning approximately 5 acres located on the northwest corner of Halls Hill Pike and Twin Oak Drive as commercial fringe CF district simultaneous with annexation. Helen Salisbury and Mitchell Bowman, applicant. The notice of the said public hearing was published in the April 5th, 2009 issue of the local newspaper. Ms. Seeley.
Good evening. Thank you again, Vice Mayor Bratcher and council members. You have before you now a request to zone property CF simultaneous with its annexation. The property is approximately 5 acres and includes one single-family house. The surrounding zoning, the zoning to the north is zoned RS 15, and it's the location of a city single-family subdivision called Woods Edge. To the east is property zoned RM16 is the currently developing Grove apartment complex. Also to the east, Zone CL, is the Providence Point Commercial Center, which has a vehicle wash, a self-storage facility, and a commercial strip center. To the south and to the east are areas of the unincorporated area of Rutherford County, which mostly consist of single-family uses with some commercial uses that are scattered about. The applicant has requested for you to zone this property CF simultaneous with its annexation to allow the property to be used commercially in the future. The applicant does not have any plans currently for the property, but he does have a desire to market the property for a more intense commercial use rather than the presently permitted residential use. He did choose or did request to be zoned CF, which is a commercial zone that we typically see between a residential area and a more urban area. A neighborhood meeting was held regarding the zoning of this property on March 2nd, 2009 at the Discovery School. The Planning Commission did unanimously recommend that this rezoning request be approved. City Council has scheduled a public hearing tonight to consider the zoning of this property and should do so. Mr. Bowman is here as well. He does not have a presentation regarding the zoning of this property, but if you have any questions, he'll be glad to answer them. Staff is always available either before or after the public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Edley. Are there any questions to Ms. Edley concerning this rezoning request from the council? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hearing none, at this time, we will open the public hearing and ask anyone here that wishes to speak for or against this rezoning request, please come to the podium and give us your name and address. Anyone wishing to speak for or against? If not, I'll close the public hearing at this time. Next, consider for passage on first reading orders to zone an area located on the northwest corner of Halls Hill Pike and Twin Oak Drive as commercial fringe CF district simultaneous with annexation.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher?
Aye. At this time, pursuant to Resolution 09-0-R-13, adopted by the City Council on March 26, 2009, we are to conduct a public hearing to consider amending the Murfreesboro City Code, Section 25 1/4-2, 25 1/4-22, and 25 1/4-24, and 25 1/4-26, dealing with the attached and ground signs. Planning staff is the applicant, and the notice of the public hearing was published in the April 5, 2009 issue of the local newspaper. Welcome, Ms. Logan.
Good evening. Thank you, Vice Mayor, members of the council. This ordinance amendment brought before you tonight to the sign ordinance is in response to issues that have been identified by city staff as we work through our ordinance. As we've gone through several years of ever-changing architecture and design in the city, we are finding that in response to the architecture changes and some of the modernization of current buildings, that the requirements in our sign ordinance concerning attached signage and its proximity to residential zones was almost a hindrance and a detriment to some of the architecture designs that were being proposed. It was also making it complicated for business owners as well. As we've moved through, we've brought before you tonight an amendment that would increase the height of attached signs from 16 feet to 24 feet located within a certain proximity to residential zones. In addition, we also found inconsistencies in the ordinance that required in some areas a 300-foot separation from commercial to residential and a 200-foot separation from commercial to residential when that requirement was to take place. For consistency's sake, staff is recommending that be changed from 200 feet throughout the ordinance. And not be 300 feet throughout the ordinance, so that we would have a consistent measure for staff and for our people who are users of the sign ordinance to be able to follow. In addition, the height recommendation of 16 to 24 feet we feel is in keeping with some of the architecture designs, and we consulted with many local architects to try to find out and make sure that the proposal would still allow them to work within the designs that they have been utilizing. We would be keeping the allowment through our sign ordinance to increase the sign by 15% through the Board of Zoning Appeals through a variance process. So that would still be permitted. If you'll find through your ordinance tonight, we have gone through and amended some of the ordinance definitions to allow for these changes. And also have amended the PUD regulations to consider PUDs non-residential zones. One of the problems that we were finding also was that when we go to measure the distance requirements, we were considering PUDs to be residential zones, but sometimes they're not. For example, the new Candlewood Suites that's going to be on Thompson Lane, although that's not a residential use, if you consider it a residential zone under the ordinance, then the 200-foot separation requirement and the height restrictions would be limiting to some of the surrounding businesses. So we have brought this before you tonight, and I'm available to answer any questions that you may have. The Planning Commission recommended this unanimously, and there were no speakers at the public hearing at the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Ms. Logan. Are there any questions from the council to Ms. Logan before I open the public hearing? At this time, I will open the public hearing and ask anyone here wishing to speak for or against this issue, please come to the podium and give us your name and address.
My name is Michael Scott, 1124 Hamilton Drive. Business is Signs by Scott. I think there's a good proposal here. I think it's a good idea. It's something that's been needed for a while. But I think it also shows that over a period of the last 20 years that our sign ordinance has been picked in a piece from here and a piece from there. It's like the old Cadillac that Johnny Cash took out of the factory, you know. He had a fender and a bumper and something from every country, and that's the way our sign ordinance is. And I think it's time that our sign ordinance be redone totally. And I think that the sign people need to come together with the city. I think the business people need to come together. We did this once, probably 20 years ago, and I've heard a lot of rumors in the last 5 years that there was a lot of bickering, there was a lot of fights. I was part of that program. There wasn't any bickering. There wasn't any fights. There were some disagreements, and they were just minor disagreements. But we finally came together through that committee and had a good sign ordinance that everybody was happy with, I think, except the city. I don't think what the city wanted came out of that. I think what the people wanted came out of that. And I think our sign ordinance, every time you change some little something in this ordinance, it affects 10 other things that you have to change. And when you change those, it affects 10 more because we have a piece from everything. We don't have a sign ordinance that's really been put in place by the experts. We don't have it. And it's a bad sign ordinance overall. But I like these changes that are being proposed this evening. I think it's a plus. But it's a real small step. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Are there others wishing to speak? Anyone else? I'll close the public hearing at this time, and next we'll consider for passage on first reading ordinance amended the Murfreesboro City Code, Section 25¼ -2, 25¼ -22, and 25¼ and 25¼ dealing with the attached and ground signs.
Move for passage on first reading, Vice Mayor.
Have a motion. Your second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher?
Aye.
Thank you.
Next, pursuant to Resolution 09-0-R-14, adopted by the Murfreesboro City Council on March 26, 2009, we are to conduct a public hearing to consider amending the Murfreesboro City Code, Section 25¼ -2, 25¼ -6, 25¼ -24, 25¼ -25, and 25¼ -26, dealing with changeable signs. Planning staff is the applicant. Notice of said public hearing was published in the April 5, 2009 issue of the local newspaper. Welcome, Mr. Whitaker.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, members of council. Staff proposes changes to the sign ordinance specifically dealing with changeable copy signs. Tonight, I have a brief PowerPoint presentation. We're also, not only are we expanding our sign ordinance to allow limited types of computerized signs, which are currently not allowed, we are also better defining 5 categories of changeable copy signs. I'd like to go over the PowerPoint presentation at this time. Again, we're going to try to better define 5 categories of changeable copy signs. We've had this request from the BZA, who hears our variance request, as well as local sign companies and the public. The 5 types are as follows: manual changeable copy, automated changeable copy, multivision, electronic graphic display, as well as video display. One thing I'd like to denote as we go through this PowerPoint, if you'll notice the check marks or the X's beside, if there's any question throughout the PowerPoint whether they would be approved or not, just look up beside of the slide and you'll see that check or X. First one we're going to talk about are the manual changeable copy. They're currently allowed by our present ordinance. We're going to continue to allow those. Here we have 2 good illustrations of manual changeable copy signs. The one on the left is a gas price sign. Those numbers, they're typically a fixed face sign. The letters or numbers are changed manually. They are not illuminating devices, and you'll hear me say that throughout this presentation numerous times. And what I mean by that is the letters or numbers are typically a clear plastic or metal, that the internal illumination or external illumination will illuminate that sign. When I say it's not illuminating device, it's not a bulb or something that makes the actual number a letter. On the right side is just a different type of changeable copy sign, different configuration. And below that, you'll see a reader board, for lack of a better term. We have had a large request, the industry has, to somehow better or allow them to change the configuration on these signs, more of an automated type, which will get us to the second category, which is the automated changeable copy. Again, this type of sign is currently allowed by ordinance, but is not allowed to be computerized in any way. And by that, what I mean, the illustration on the left, you will see a lot of gas station canopies. You can see on the right, Value Place Hotel's got one. Those are actually scrolling type signs. If you'll see our little 4 in the middle, how it scrolls up. The way they work is they'll have a piece of Lexan or some type of polymer that has letters or numbers on it. To change those letters or numbers, they will actually roll up or index up or down. Currently, our ordinance requires them to go out to the Value Place, go out to the pole, manually dial those in and change them, or the gas price sign. What we're proposing in this ordinance is allow computers to do that. Now, the beauty of that for people that may have multiple gas stations or multiple hotels can actually, from a computer, via the internet or satellite, once they want to change them, they can change them all at one time. No more having to go to the location to do that. A few things I'd like to point out. The automated changeable signs that we propose to allow are the scrolling type that you see here. And also on your left is a flip matrix type. It's typically a solid face, as you can see, that blue. And as you configure the segments, if you will, the white parts of the sign, depending on what letter or number you'd like to illustrate, they will actually roll out to indicate that. On the right is just a different configuration of a flip matrix type. We actually talked to 9 different manufacturers, not sign companies, but the actual manufacturers of the signs, to ensure that what we're allowing or proposing to allow is not some type of sign that is not currently used, not currently available. This type of sign is still widely used in the market because it's so, they can make them quite large. They are versatile, and they are currently still used in the market. So we made sure that that was one of the objectives.
I have one question, if I could stop you. These types of signs, are those, what kind of lighting would be allowed with those? Are they backlit?
If I back up here, let's see if I can back up. These are typically internally lit because, like I said, they're of a clear type material, and the light actually backlight shines through. The flip matrix type are typically externally illuminated. And some, on interstate signs you'll see, they're actually of a luminous material, and it's a reflective type material. Some of them don't even have lights. It's just the headlights, which you'll see on the interstate. So there's several different ways they can be illuminated. But themselves are not a illuminating device, I'd like to point out. The next one I'd like to talk about, which is currently not allowed in our ordinance, and we don't propose to allow that, are multivision. You can see here a multivision sign is typically made up of horizontal or vertical slats. This one is actually a tri-vision, which means it has 3 sides to it. You'll have different copy on each side of that slat. You can see here they'll rotate at a different interval or some timed interval. Again, these are currently not allowed and not proposed to be allowed. The next one I'd like to talk about is electronic graphic display. This is a quite large LED display. You can see here that as it rotates, it's not moving. This is what distinguishes this type from the next category I'm going to talk about. It's a static display. It either fades in or fades out or immediately goes to the changeable copy. Naturally, they are computerized. Again, we don't propose to allow this type of sign. You remember me talking about the illuminated devices versus not. Well, this is one we'd classify as illuminating device. It's all LED. Now, they're not just a limited LED. They can be CRT, which is like your TV tube. They can be fiber optics, projected type signs, and I have some examples in here, will also fall under these displays. It's just a smaller type electronic graphic display. This is a LED gas price sign. And it could be LCD would fall into this as well, type displays. And this is a bulb type that's not typically used anymore. This is but it would, because of illuminating devices, it would fall under this category. This is an example of a fiber optics. And this is a projected sign, something you may or may not have seen. Typically, you can project this on any vertical surface, and here it happens to be on the side of a building. This is the video display, which is the 5th one that I'd like to talk about. Currently, it's not allowed by our sign ordinance, and we propose, again, not to allow this type currently at this time. This one happens to be an LED video display. Again, what distinguishes this from the last category is this one is in motion. The best illustration I can give you of that is your TV at home. So you can see it's constantly moving, rotating. It gives the appearance of being in motion. This is another example, the smaller display. Again, these can be LED, can be projected type, can be LCD. Here is one of the projected video signs. This is just on the side of a building here. And this is another type of display. It's just rotating. In summary, we propose, as I said, to define 5 types of changeable copy signs. The proposed amendments will expand our existing sign ordinance. It will allow computerized, flip matrix, scrolling, segmented types of signs that are currently not allowed. Manual changeable copy signs can be converted to automated changeable. And by that, what I mean, if you have one of these gas price or the one that you saw for the hotel, they would be able to come in and convert those over, if this is passed, to a computerized type. Additionally, automated changeable copy signs will be able to be incorporated to off-premise signs. So if there's a billboard and somebody wants to put a gas price sign or a hotel that wanted to display that, they could actually add those to them. And we have size limitations in here, but they would be actually to add these 2 billboards. It will continue to allow reader board types of signs. That was one of the first ones that we had talked about. And the proposed amendments would not change the status of multivision, electronic graphic display, video display signs, which are currently not allowed. I would like to add that in your information that you've received, there's a summary of traffic studies that the legal department had included in your information. That information was also provided to the Planning Commission when it went to the Planning Commission. And in that study, you will see, I think there's 9 or so that they had reviewed and included in that. But part of the staff's concern on the last 3 types of signs that we talked about, the video display, the graphic, and the tri-vision or multi-vision type, are the changing, the rotating, those things that are distraction. I think we all agree that if you've seen these type of signs, the intensity levels, which can be quite bright, the rotating, the changing, can be a distraction to drivers. Therefore, in that information that you've received are studies on how that affects drivers and et cetera. Also, the Federal Highway Department has a study currently underway that will probably be out sometime toward the end of the year. Staff is monitoring those studies. We're looking into it, as we have been for some time, and we will continue to monitor those studies to see how it turns out and the effect of these signs on driver and driver safety. David Ives is here with us tonight, who can answer any questions if you have some on the traffic study. I'd like to point out that when this went to the Planning Commission on the March 4th public hearing, it was unanimously approved, recommended to council. And also, we had a stakeholders meeting when we started this on January the 29th. We invited anyone that had taken permits out with us, the Building Codes Department, the last year. We had sent out invitations to. We presented the same information to the stakeholders. They had a lot of comments, some of which we have incorporated actually into the changes. And I'm available for questions before or after the public hearing, if there's any.
Any questions to Mr. Whitaker or to Mr. Ives at this time before we open the public hearing? Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. At this time, we will open the public hearing, and we'll ask anyone here wishing to speak for or against this particular ordinance, please come to the podium and give us your name and your address.
Good evening. I'm Mayo Taylor, 1907 Bartway Drive. I'm speaking strictly for myself tonight. I haven't been here before you in a while, but I've been following this development by way of the news and Channel 3 while I was on the Rutherford County Planning Commission. We repeatedly were back to the table thinking about signs, so I understand what you're faced with on this. I want to completely support the recommendation from the Planning Department and the Planning Commission. I think they've done a good job of working up a compromise that allows reasonable use of the current technology. It addresses the issues about safety for people who have to work with the signs. I started noticing the large graphic signs and the video signs in particular a number of years ago on trips out to California to visit family. And it just happens that on the freeway from the airport that I fly into to their house, it's just lined with these. And I think it's a disaster in terms of being distracting to people on the highways. It can be particularly dangerous with some of the ones that are extremely bright and extremely active when you're coming up out of a dark stretch of road and you're suddenly confronted with these kind of excessively bright lights. I think the motion is an added component of that, and then the sheer size of them. So I think the Commission and the Department's done a good job, and I'd encourage you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tyler. Are there others wishing to speak for or against?
Again, my name is Michael Scott, 1124 Hamilton Drive. I want to thank Mr. Whitaker for having the meeting that he had. I think that's a very important part of the process of any of this. And I think that him having businesses here and sign companies here, he got a lot of good information, and I think it needs to be done a lot more, Gary. I appreciate that. And I would also like to have the same amount of time to speak that he did in order to rebuttal this. Ms. Nixon was our past president of codes, was here about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. And she presented to you gentlemen a proposal that the sign people and the business people in Murfreesboro wanted LED signs. And that they were working on that, and very shortly they were going to have that put together, and we were going to get that. But in compensation for that, at that time, we were going to reduce the height of the signs on the interstate from 125 feet to 50 feet. We were going to have the setback from businesses to homes to go from 250 feet to 500. We reduced the percentage of a sign on the front of the building. And you gentlemen all agreed on that. And Vice Mayor, you asked, well, are they going to get the LEDs? Yeah, they're going to get the LEDs. So you gentlemen passed that. And I think you've probably opened yourself up for one heck of a lawsuit when you did that, because we don't have the LEDs. And we probably need to go back to where we were with 125-foot signs with a 250-foot setback. It's either that or give up the LEDs. And I also wanted to tell you that my cell phone right here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, the cell phones in this town have created more traffic accidents than all of the LED signs in the United States in the last 25 years that they've been available. And yes, they have been available for 25 years, gentlemen. This technology has been here that long. Murfreesboro has been wrestling with it for 8 years and saying we need to take baby steps, we need to take baby steps. Well, if we had taken baby steps with computers that were offered to Murfreesboro some time back, we'd still be using typewriters if we did what you gentlemen are doing to LED signs. You guys have said that we need to take baby steps, we need to take baby steps. Well, gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that that baby is dead. You guys killed it because you didn't make a decision. It's gone. By the time you get ready to make decisions on LED signs in this town, like other communities have done across the United States, there will be something new coming along that will replace LEDs, and again, you will be taking baby steps. And I don't think it's baby steps. I think the head people in charge of Murfreesboro don't like these signs, so they're using every excuse. I've heard the excuse that X-rated material can be put on them. I've heard the excuse that traffic accidents can happen. I've heard everything there is. We're not taking baby steps, gentlemen. You're slow walking this thing because you don't want it. It's called slow walking. Now, a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to speak to the chief of police in Las Vegas. Man, that is Sign City right there. That is one big Sign City. And we definitely don't want to be Las Vegas, no more than Smyrna, Nashville, or anybody else does. But I talked to this police chief about accidents that had been caused in his city from people seeing too much signs, reading signs. He told me he couldn't name one accident, not one in all the years he had been there, could he name one accident that had happened because of a sign, or was even a contributing factor in that accident. And that's Sign City. So, I mean, it's kind of a joke for you gentlemen to sit up here and talk about it's a hazard to traffic. It's not. There's not. The study that the government is doing is going to show that it's not. But also, I think these businesses around Murfreesboro need LED signs in order to reach their maximum potential and produce the type taxes that they need to produce for us. Right now, our city, according to the State Financial Office, is over $350 million in debt, and predicted by experts to be $1 billion in debt in the next 5 years at the rate we're going. So I think we need to get all the taxes we can. We need to allow these businesses to grow to their potential. And LED advertising is a cheap way for them to advertise and not have to go on cable TV, newspaper, etc. The Chamber of Commerce recently started an online voting on LED signs. And someone in the city had a talk with them and they cut it off. But they did have 220 votes come in before it was cut off. And it was unanimous that the businesses want this. It was very much unanimous. And the Daily News Journal did a poll about 2 years ago when this Lamar billboard was put up over here on Old Fort Parkway. And in that poll in their paper, 89% of the people here agreed that they liked the sign. There wasn't anything wrong with it. So you have 100% of the sign companies who want this. You have 90-some% of the businesses who want this. You have 89% of the public who voted in the Daily News Journal that wants this. And you've turned it down several times already. With this overwhelming majority of the public telling you they want this, are you going to once again vote this down? Are you going to say we need to take baby steps again? That's my question. Are you going to vote against the will of the public? And this is the will of the public, gentlemen. Now, Mr. Whitaker just said that Flip Matrix is still in production. Yes, it is. And he's talked to the factories. And he could have talked to the sign companies. They tell you the same thing. Flip Matrix is in production. The reason it's in production because towns like Murfreesboro, who don't allow LEDs, they have to use the Flip Matrix. But the LEDs are coming on so strong across the United States, and the companies are growing so fast that the Flip Matrix are doing less and less and less. But there's all kinds of examples around us about LEDs. In every town around us, there's LEDs. You can go there and find out what their studies are. You can find out how they control them. It's not hard, gentlemen. It's not hard at all. And I noticed Mr. Whitaker showed a projected video sign on a building. And I haven't seen one of those yet either, Mr. Whitaker. But I did notice something about it, that those projected video signs are only good at night. They're not good in the daytime. So that's only part of the time you're going to be able to see those. But I'm not a big fan of those myself right now. But I think we do need LEDs, gentlemen. So let's see what you can do to help the community that's asking for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this proposal, please come to the podium at this time.
Vice Mayor Bratcher, member of the council, I'm Richard Baines. I live on Parkview Terrace here in Murfreesboro. And I wish to speak in support of regulating the use of programmable electronic billboards, if that's the correct terms, or signs. My concern arose after being exposed to this advertising media after several visits to Jackson, Tennessee. One example that particularly stands out is it's a programmable sign on a used car lot where the operator can project, I guess it's a digital photo of the deal of the day, all the features of the car, the price, and everything else. And it can change. It's changeable. It's not very attractive, and you almost have to stop in traffic to be able to read everything that's on it. I tried to picture what Broad Street or Memorial Boulevard would look like if every used car lot, every pawn shop, every payday loan shop had one of these signs whose sole purpose is to attract our attention. I can see dancing dollars, jumping monkeys with fistful of dollars. In addition to the deal of the day pictured on each car lot. Our high-density business areas would look like a carnival midway. Those who are promoting this technology will put forth the most innocent examples of these signs, but once you let that genie out of the bottle without a rope on his leg, it's game on. I urge you in considering this ordinance that you be fair, but run through your mind what the worst case scenario might be and make sure that the ordinance protects us from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bain. Are there others wishing to speak for or against? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing at this time. Any discussion or comments from the council? Next, we'll consider for passage on first reading the orders to amend Murfreesboro City Code, Section 25 1/4-2, 25 1/4-6, 25 1/4-24, and 25 1/4-25, and 25 1/4-26, dealing with changeable signs.
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments, questions?
Mr. Whitaker, based on what you're telling us, we are expanding our current sign ordinance that we have right now, correct?
That is correct. Staff, the proposal before you tonight will actually allow limited types of computerized signs. We're not taking anything away that's currently there. We're actually only expanding that. And one other issue, when staff was considering the 3 types that are not allowed, we did check with several other communities to see, in fact, how the communities that did not act as Murfreesboro did to basically limit those types in the beginning. And some of the issues that we looked at were naturally safety. Another one was the aesthetics. And the final one was the ability to actually regulate those types of signs, as Mr. Scott had talked about earlier. What we're finding from other communities that have allowed those types, it's very difficult to regulate them because with a stroke of a keyboard computer, you can change the intensity, the changeable rate on them, and we're seeing cities now coming back and trying to tighten up regulations because it's difficult to regulate those types of signs.
If you would have to say that out of the complaints that you get in your office, not just, building complaints, would you say that signage is one of the toughest things that you deal with in your office?
It is definitely the most difficult issue that I deal with on a daily basis.
But that's just not from sign companies who are upset that they're not getting what they request. It's from residents who are calling regarding signage as well.
Oh, yes. We have the residents call, complain about signs being posted in their yards, signs going up, the aesthetics. Our citizens are concerned about the way that our city looks, the aesthetics of our city, and we do get that, especially, like I said, around election time. We get bombarded with complaints. Not only that, but just throughout the year, anytime new signs go up, we get complaints about the height. Again, and one thing I'd like to point out, the last 3 proposals that we brought in front of the council, we have actually, all 3 have increased or loosened up, if you will, sign regulations. We have not brought anything in the last 3 proposals that would actually increase regulations that I'm aware of. So I do believe we are actually taking steps in the right direction, steps in the directions in which we're being requested to. As Mike had referred to, baby steps. I had rather take a look at these. Again, I said the Federal Highway Department is looking at a study that will come out toward the end of the year. We're going to be looking at that, and we'll continue to look at those studies as they come out.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Whitaker.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the council before we call the roll? Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher?
Aye. Next, request from the Rutherford County Chamber of Commerce Convention and Visitors Bureau with regards to the TSSAA 2009-2010 Blue Cross Bowl Football Championships. Who's going to be presenting that?
I'm on the hearing.
Ms. Harriet?
Vice Mayor Bratcher, Ms. Herring is here tonight, and she's available to answer any of the questions that you might have regarding this request, if I could. And she had called me this afternoon and wanted to know if she needed to be prepared for comments, and I told her that I'm sure if y'all had questions, you would ask them. But to kind of bring you up to date, there have been several meetings between chamber representatives, the city, the university, across the community in an effort to discuss the new method that TSSAA is taking and moving in the direction they're moving in order to try to cover costs that they incur in bringing these games to whatever community they're going to be in. For the football championship, they are requiring that any city that wished to bid must bid a minimum of $231,000 to cover their expenses. The meeting that we had yesterday concerning this, day before yesterday, concerning this bid that the chamber has to put forth to TSSAA, in reviewing the income figures for the last several years, the last 2 years have not been the best for the football championship games. And it can be a number of variables, a number of reasons why the revenue is down. This past year, the teams that participated, a number of them were from the Middle Tennessee region, and because of the economy, because of other happenings, the attendance was off. The number of ticket sales were down. A year earlier, it wasn't weather that would have stopped the games, and didn't, but it was the weather was bad enough that it ate into the attendance records that had been set the previous year. And those variables that are beyond the control of the chamber, the TSSAA, in an effort to assist with the raising of revenue, TSSAA has increased the ticket price for this coming year from $10 to $12. The chamber tourism section is looking at developing a sports council comprised of chamber business members that are directly affected by the attendance and participation of the visitors within the businesses that would be directly affected. And it's believed that the university itself, I'm glad to report, is going to try to work with the city, the chamber, in reducing some of the expenses that have been edging up over the last several years. And we really think, we hope, nobody has any guarantee, that the games themselves will generate sufficient revenues to meet this guarantee. And even with the offer to meet the guaranteed figure, we know we're going to be facing competition from other cities that would love to have these games in their community and may be willing to do more in the form of a guarantee than we can do. But we feel like this is a figure, a not to exceed figure, in the event these monies would be needed to make up a shortfall, if there were one, that will let our local chamber put them in a position to do a sales job if that needs to happen. And I'm happy to say and report to you that the relationship between Rutherford County, Murfreesboro, MTSU, and TSSAA is such that if there's a way that we can receive favorite consideration based on past performance I think we stand in line to bring these tourist dollars again to Murfreesboro. So again, there's no guarantees that we will get it, but what we were attempting to do was put the chamber in a position of making the bid, meeting the minimum requirement, and with some minor changes, get the program in such shape as it would at least break even. Hopefully, it will exceed this revenue figure. If it does, the chamber has committed to taking any excess revenue that goes beyond the guaranteed amount, set that aside for future years that might help to offset future guarantees that might have to be made. So they would not take any excess monies, use it for operations, use it for anything else other than to have it earmarked to help offset possible shortfalls in the future.
We talked a little bit earlier on the last public hearing. There was talk of tax revenues helping our business community. And I know this has been the TSSAA, their functions here and the things that we've provided in way of facilities and the accommodations that the city of Murfreesboro has been providing throughout the years has made it a really good venue for them to host it. Not only mentioned the central location of our city. What, in terms of dollars, I may be asking this off the cuff, but what impact does that have on our local businesses and our local community as far as tax revenues and things like that? Mr. Haley or Ms. Herring, do y'all have any?
I believe Ms. Herring could respond to that.
We feel like the total number of championships that we host here, which is about 12 that we host, reflects about a $10 million impact on our economy a year.
I know it has a huge impact on our local businesses. I know they really appreciate the efforts of MTSU and the city of Murfreesboro and TSSAA. And
it really keeps our hotels full. It adds to our hotel and lodging tax. Our restaurants are full. The retail shopping is always impacted by these tournaments, and it just shines a spotlight on Rutherford County, Murfreesboro.
I know Ronnie Carter's been the president for, I think, since 1986, and he's done a tremendous job, and we want to congratulate him on, I think, his retirement. Mm-hmm. And I think the new president is actually a resident of the city of Murfreesboro, so we want to congratulate him on that post as well. Council members, what is your recommendations on this from their city manager?
Vice Mayor Bratcher, I would like to make the motion that we agree to help the Chamber and the Convention Visitors Bureau in this matter as it's been laid out by Mr. Haley. I'd also like to add that having served on this committee for 3 years now, I'm amazed at the hard work, the continual long-range planning that goes on by this group of very industrious folks, and they are always telling us about events that they can now schedule 2 and 3 years out because so many pieces have been put into place here in our community, the Embassy Suites, the updated retail facilities, the number of hotel rooms throughout the community, and then the excellent facilities that we have. So I would not want to see us stop short in addressing this matter, and we'll all experience greater success by it. So with that, I make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Have a motion. Here's a second.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher?
Aye. Thank you, Ms. Herring.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you being here. Next, we'll hear from the General Manager of the Murfreesboro Electric Department with regards to the 2008 Financial and Project Summary Report. Mr. Steve Sachs, welcome. Mr. Sachs, I want to tell you again how much we appreciate, and we wish you would pass it along to your employees of the Murfreesboro Electric Department, along with you as a leader and those who are in charge, what a great job you did in helping our citizens to restore their power to their homes during the tornadoes. take that message back on behalf of the council, please.
Vice Mayor Bratcher, I appreciate that, and thank you so much. I'm trying to work on this technology here just a second, and we've provided you copies of my PowerPoint slides, so if you and the council bear with me just a minute, I think we'll get this going.
Take your time.
There we go. Now, yes, for this. Okay. Again, Vice Mayor Bratcher, thank you for this opportunity to present our report. Council members, thank you for your kind words. City Manager Haley, Mr. Haley Roger, thank you so much for what you've said about our department and other departments that work there in the storm. We concur with what you've said. This was a real team, and Rob Lyons, our hats are all off to you for coordinating this for us. Susan McGannon did a great job. We talked several times. She was in the EOC. It really was a phenomenal type of experience. We were all on top of our games this that weekend, and it showed. And we too are getting the same kind of comments from the public. I'd like to take a few minutes and just give you an update of where we are with Murfreesboro Electric. It's been a real good year for us, and I'll work through my PowerPoint slides if you can follow through. Murfreesboro Electric, of course, was formed in 1939 as part of the TVA system. We purchased our company from the Tennessee Power Company, and we've operated as the Murfreesboro Electric since then. We operate under the Tennessee Power Act, which has remained fairly constant in all these years, but has had some slight modification. This is a list of our board members. We've just added one new board member. Thank you very much for taking care of that piece of business. I believe at the last council meeting. Am I going forward? Yes. TVA has 158 power distributors. We serve, TVA itself serves over 8.5 million customers throughout the 7 states, both residential, business, and industrial customers. As you know, we take power at 6 substations. This is a list of the substations that we take power out from TVA. We have our own power substations that we serve ourselves. We have 4 of those stations that we take voltage at 46 kV, and these are run by ours. We have a total of 10 substations altogether, and a couple of these substations are the ones, Vice Mayor, that were affected by the tornadoes last week. Capacity is 675,000 kilowatts. Peak power, our highest peak was in August of 2007. 346,000, with a reserve capacity of about 48%. The system has 420 miles of overhead lines, 206 miles of underground. This is still an increase. Our system is still growing even in the economic times that we faced. The electric system continues to grow. 528 poles were installed last year with a total of a little over 14,000. Some of those have been reinstalled. About 50 of those got reinstalled a few days ago with the tornadoes. We provide 5,600 pole attachments. Those are people that rent spaces from us, like the telephone company and the cable company, that pay us for those attachments. 623 new transformers were installed in 2008 for a total of 13,226. 411 new lights were installed, both security lights and street lights, for a total of close to 15,000 lights now. 120,600,000 in plant in 2007. That increased to 132 in 2008. Again, a continued growth of about $11 million in new facilities. One of the things that we've done, Vice Mayor, as you know, we've been looking at our operating ratios as they compare to other utilities across the country, and we have been very interested in how we do in reliability. We've installed a couple years ago a system of tracking reliability. And we've also been working very hard in maintenance of areas that have been problem areas with reliability. This is a picture of some work we're doing on Morgan Road, where we've completely replaced all the underground cables that we purchased from the co-op several years ago, many years ago. I think Mr. Washington, these were about 20, 25-year-old cables, so we've replaced all those at this point. Our goal is to be as reliable as we can. 5 nines is an industry standard. We are, last year we were at 99.985, so we're getting awfully close to our goal, but we have a little room to go. And we're tracking those every day and every week and every month as we have outages. Tree trimming is also a factor in outages, and as you know, we've been pretty aggressive in the last few years with tree trimming. Some of the things that cause outages that we track: overhead equipment failures, overhead material failures, birds, animals, snakes, believe it or not, in underground equipment, trees, lightning, those type of things. Overhead equipment failures can deal with connections that have failed, equipment that has worn out that needs to be replaced, and these are things that we can deal with, and our tracking process is designed to help us find equipment that's failing and replace it before it fails and causes outages to our customers. Mr. Kimball's with me today, Mark Kimball, tonight. We've worked real hard in automating our system so that if there are problems on the power system, it seeks and finds more reliable sources of power. And I would have said tonight, had we not had the tornadoes, that all of our intelligent equipment that we installed in the avenues has been completely successful, and the power has not been out at all in the avenues and in the Embassy Suite area. But I have to tell you tonight that's not true. The tornadoes took part of that out, and it was out for about 6 or 7 hours until we were able to restore it. However, I would not do justice if I told you this equipment tried to operate and tried to find reliable sources of power, but when the substations went down, it just couldn't find anywhere to go. We've spent about $2 million to date with our smart grid technology, and we see more of that coming in the future. There's a picture of some of the equipment that we've installed in the ground. Just some more of our statistics. We paid about $98 million for electricity in 2008. We collected about $122 million. We have about an 80% payment, a little over 80% of our funds to TVA, which gives us about 19.8 cents left to operate our system from. Residential customers paid about 8.1 cents per kilowatt hour. That's our average residential use of 1,275 kilowatt hours gives an average bill of a little over $100. National average of electricity is about 11.5 cents a kilowatt hour. So Murfreesboro Electric still maintains a great margin. We're about 3.37 cents below the national average for electricity. Just a short synopsis of our financial report. Again, I don't need to read all the numbers. You can get a sense of where our expenses are. And again, I'm pleased to present you $2.117 million in lieu of taxes to pay our portion of the support for the city. And I think we, again, are the high water mark in the high taxpayer records for the city, but I'm not completely sure. $614,000 to the county.
Do you have that in the form of one of those huge checks?
I need to bring you one of those big checks. I haven't done that. Yeah. Mr. Haley, the check's in the mail.
Man, deliver it.
Thank you again for the work that you're able to do for us in keeping our rates down by using the Tennessee Municipal Bond Fund. It's been very successful for you, and it's been very successful for us, and we couldn't have done it without your support.
Any questions to Mr. Sachs regarding this report?
I've got about 2 or 3 more little pieces left,
okay,
if I can. Just a number of items about the amount of kilowatt hours that we've sold. We have had, Vice Mayor, as you know, we've had some of our employees participate in the Lineman Rodeo, and I'm pleased to say tonight that one of our fellows brought home all the trophies and was very successful with that. We plan on participating in that again this year. Just a list of some of the projects that we're going to do this year, including a new substation that we need to add out on Medical Center Boulevard. A list of some of the projects that our employees support, that Murfreesboro Electric supports, and I'm pleased to say that employees contributed over $17,000 to United Way. A list of projects that we're going to deal with in the future, and you can read through those. This is our 70th anniversary, and we're going to be doing some recognition for our 70th anniversary. We have a video being produced by MTSU, and we also have a historic book being produced. A picture of Mary Woodruff, who is our oldest surviving employee at 98 this year. She has retired almost 2 of her replacements since she retired, so that's probably a high watermark. I'll be glad to answer any questions or comments that you have for us. We're pleased to be here to present this tonight. Again, we thank you for your comments about the storm events. Our employees logged about 5,600 hours, not our employees, but all of the workers in town during the event. It was clearly a great effort, and we appreciate everybody's support. I'll answer any questions at this time, if there are any.
I think Mr. Haley has a question or a comment.
If they're following any questions or comments, council might have.
Council members, you have any questions concerning this report from Mr. Sachs?
I have one question, Vice Mayor Bratcher. Did MED hit their projections on consumption in this last fiscal year? I'm just wondering, did you see us? You mentioned that usage had gone up.
Actually, Mr. Edwards, we're a little bit over where we thought we would be consumption-wise, primarily because we had a little warmer summer, a little hotter weather than we expected. But we're on track for where we should be, and clearly we haven't set a new peak. Our peak was in 2007.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Haley.
Vice Mayor, members of the council, on your desk you have Resolution 09R07 establishing payments in lieu of taxes for the Murfreesboro Electric Department for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2009. With the adoption of that resolution, I'm sure that Mr. Sachs will then get us the city the check for $2,382,953.11, and that would make them the largest payer of a tax bill in the city.
Take a personal check until he gets 90
We would
check.
take personal checks, no credit cards, though.
I did bring the 11 cents with me tonight, but the rest will be in a check.
Council members, you hear the recommendation to approve this resolution.
So moved.
Have a motion. I hear a second.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the resolution. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher?
Aye. Again, thank you, Mr. Sachs. Mr. Kimball, thank you for all your hard work, along with P.D. Minot and all the employees of Murfreesboro Electric. Please tell them we appreciate their hard work and dedication. Next, consider recommendation of the city manager. We have 3 different items. First is the Evergreen Cemetery repairs and maintenance. We'll take them one at a time, and I think Mr. Haley is going to present that, but I would like to recognize we have Chairman Roberts and some of the other board members with us tonight. If you have any questions, I'm sure they'd be glad to help out. Mr. Haley?
Vice Mayor Bratcher and members of the council, yes, we have Chairman Jim Roberts, Mr. Henry Huddleston, and Mr. Tommy Horde, members of the Evergreen Cemetery Board with us. I don't know if there are others or not, but I did see those 3. I provided to you tonight 2 letters. One was a letter of request from the Evergreen Cemetery Board, and then I have put a letter on top of that. The Evergreen Cemetery Board is owned by the City of Murfreesboro, and the board is charged with the operation and maintenance of the facility. This publicly owned cemetery has historically operated from revenue generated through the sale of burial lots. They currently are unable to fund certain costs associated with 2 current needs that were not budgeted for and available funds are not sufficient to cover the cost of these expenses. You will see from the attached letter from the board that the board has made a request for the City of Murfreesboro to approve an amount not to exceed $250,000 to pay for the final preparation and paving of the road that was built in the cemetery in the year 2007, and pay for trimming and or removal of trees identified by Ms. Holloway for action to address their current needs. I recommend approval of their request for the city to provide up to $250,000 for these two items described in Mr. Roberts' April 14, 2009 letter, and that the funding would come from unforeseen. Be happy to answer any questions council might have.
Any questions for Mr. Haley on this recommendation? What are the wishes of the council?
I think this is an appropriate and necessary request, and I move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher?
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Roberts and Mr. Howard and Mr. Huddleston and the entire board. Appreciate all your hard work and all you do for our residents of the city. Next is the Employee Handbook, Section 5008, Policy for Reduction in Workforce and Personnel Layoffs. Mr. Haley?
Vice Mayor and Council, I'm asking you tonight to consider Section 5008, which outlines a policy, a procedure to be followed that is titled Reduction in Workforce or Personnel Layoffs. I would ask you to consider adoption tonight the proposed policy on layoffs. We believe it would be advisable for the city to have an established policy before such action might become necessary, rather than to try to craft one for the middle or at the end of the budgetary process. At this time, I do not know whether layoffs will be necessary or not. This policy, as proposed, reflects several priorities, and it is important that the council give direction to me in these areas before any decision making becomes more specific. First, the policy reflects that the city's needs for services is the key factor, and that this will be analyzed rather than using an across-the-board measure. Second, factors to be used after the determination of need has been made are identified and prioritized. The council may wish to modify these factors through addition or deletion or to change their priority. Third, the policy reflects that employees who would otherwise be laid off may be transferred to another position in the city, even if they do not meet all of the required qualifications, if they can obtain them within 6 months, and that any transfer is voluntary. Fourth, it recognizes the involuntary nature and time of layoffs by allowing employees who are laid off who have accrued excess sick leave to be paid at 3-to-1 ratio, and we already have a policy on that. Fifth, it modifies the city's hiring procedure to make rehiring laid-off employees easier. Should any member of the council have any questions, I'll be ready to answer those at this time.
Council members, any questions to Mr. Haley regarding this Employee Handbook, Section 5008?
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher?
Aye. Next is Veterans Administration, the VA Fire Service Agreement. Haley?
Vice Mayor and council members, also provided to you tonight is a recommendation from me that the city enter into a 2-month extension of the current fire services contract with the VA in the amount of $65,000 per month That's an increase over the current figure of $56,250 per month. The reason I'm recommending and asking that you allow this to happen would be to give the VA and the city an opportunity to finalize a contract that I would like to see established for a 22-month period that would expire April the 30th, 2011, thereby giving time to make any consideration for another contract of services, have it timely to meet the budget needs, budgeting requirements of the city for the 2011-2012 year.
Any questions from Mr. Haley regarding the contract or extension for the fire service of the VA?
No, Vice Mayor, I move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher?
Aye. At this time, we're going to hear a report from our city treasurer, personnel director, Ms. Sue Mahon, with regards to the executive search firms and for the city manager search. Ms. Mahon, welcome.
Good evening. At our last city council meeting, as you remember, we spent a considerable amount of time going over the procedure that we might undertake for an executive search as we look for a city manager due to Mr. Haley's retirement. You gave me two assignments, one that I would interpolate everything we discussed last week as related to the education, the experience, knowledge, skills, and abilities of the things that you would like to have into the draft copy of the recruitment profile. If you would look before you tonight, there is a copy of that revised recruitment profile. It's in a draft copy only. This is not something that's final. It's just for discussion. But if you would either at this time or later put that in your notebook just under the recruitment profile, that would be great. Also, you asked that I would compile two lists of questionnaires to be sent out to the 3 consulting firms that were selected for review. I have emailed those to you, and I've heard back from all of you either through email or verbally, and I've also heard from the mayor, and he did approve those. So, those are in place. I have the questions that was attached for the cities. When we get the references in, then we'll go with that. So I just really came tonight to give you an update as to where we are on this, and as soon as I hear back from the cities, then I'll be back to you with a report. Do you have any questions? I'll be available if you have anything.
Any questions for Ms. Mahon on the information that she's provided at this time? Hearing none, thank you, Ms. Mahon. We appreciate the information.
Thank you.
Next, we'll consider any beer permit applications. I know we have several. Ms. Wright?
We have 4 tonight. None of them are completely finished, but they're all close. We have a convenience store at 1820 Bradable Pike that is a new location, and they are just on the brink of finishing their last building inspection. We have a restaurant at 1970 Medical Center Parkway that expects to pass their final inspection tomorrow. We have another restaurant at 1841 South Church Street, which is already open, and they're almost through with passing the codes needed for beer permits. And then lastly, we have a special event for the Main Street Jazz Fest downtown. Last year, y'all allowed them to have a beer garden, and they want to do that again this year. They will not be able to finish their building and codes until probably the day before the event because they won't set up early. So once codes passes them, we would like to issue that permit. So all of these we're asking for permission to issue the permit once codes has signed off.
Any questions from Ms. Wright about the beer permits or the conditions? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher?
Aye. Next item is consider the payment of statements, and you have a new list of payments on your desk.
Move that we pay the statements.
Second.
Motion is second to pay the bills. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher?
Aye. Next, we consider any other business to come before the council from the council or staff. And I know there's one item I'd like to ask, if I could, Mr. Lyons, if he would give us an update on there's a meeting going on in Murfreesboro, the Tennessee City Managers Meeting. Can
Yes,
you
sir.
give us a little
Yes, sir.
information on that, please?
Be glad to. For the first time, Murfreesboro is the host to the Tennessee City Managers Association. The spring conference moves around the state. This is the first time the meeting's been held in Murfreesboro. So for the past day and a half, approximately 70 city managers from Bristol to Collierville have been in our community. I know you would be proud about the things they are saying about Murfreesboro. They've clearly enjoyed their stay, been knocked out by the whole Gateway area. The conference has had very much a Murfreesboro flavor. Mike Pirtle and Sharon Fitzgerald, both Murfreesboro residents, talked about media relations in city government. Dr. Penn today gave a presentation about the economy, and then I also gave a short presentation about the Gateway project and the history behind that. So everyone is having a great time. I think there's a number of folks who like to see it happen here full-time each time our conference has our spring conference. So this will be the first of many meetings to come to our community. I know we would like to see the Tennessee Municipal League come to Murfreesboro. So thank you for allowing me to give you the update.
Thank you for showing them how to do it right, Mr. Lyons. Any other, Ms. McGannon?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Two matters of other business I'd like to ask you to consider. The first is to approve the agreements that SunTrust Bank wants to have signed regarding their handling of the pension fund monies. They're one of the places where we invest our pension fund monies, and they have an investment management agreement, an addendum describing us as a legal entity, and an addendum for wire transfers. Those were considered by the pension committee yesterday. I apologize for not putting them in the packet, but I wasn't sure if the pension committee would have some concerns. I would share with you that the pension committee did discuss the fact that the contract calls for a 2-year period under Georgia law to raise any claim that the city might have against the bank if there was some mishandling. That's different than the period that's customarily provided under Tennessee law, but they are Georgia-based. After careful discussion of this, the pension committee thought it was appropriate, in part based on the fact that the city's investment advisor, Chartwell, does review those reports monthly and makes presentations to the city quarterly. Your staff has discussed that issue, and we feel that that's acceptable. The documents contain a place for the persons who would be authorized to give instructions to SunTrust to transfer money from wire to an investment that's been approved. Currently, that is the mayor, the city recorder, and the city treasurer. And so you're being asked to, as the sponsor of the plan, to be a signing entity. Both the pension committee, since it has certain role with the pension plan, the city as the sponsor, and Pinnacle as the trustee of the plan would all be signing this document. Pinnacle has not yet signed, but their attorney has reviewed, and he's also indicated that they will sign, that they believe the documents are in order, as do I, and so would ask your approval for entry into these documents with the individuals I identified having authority under them. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Ms. McGannon? Sorry, the pension.
So this addendum doesn't change any rates, terms, fees, or conditions other than what you just listed?
The rates aren't specified in here. There is no change that's been identified. It's simply, they recognized they didn't have an up-to-date document for the handling, and so this is a compliance effort on their part to make sure that they have documented what the city's authorization to them is.
So you're satisfied that all we're talking about are wiring instructions and wiring authorities?
Well, that's a major portion of it, but they are they manage certain investments for the plan, and this authorizes them to do that and spells out, who has authority to give them direction. It's not just limited to wiring.
Okay.
They have this money for us, and this sets out the terms and conditions upon which they can manage this money for us.
Very good.
Any other questions? What are your recommendations?
Move for approval.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the recommendations of our city attorney. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Mayor, if I might also put on your table Resolution 09R08, which would be approving applying for 2009 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Recovery Program Award for 2008 through 2012, designating a representative for such grant and approving entry into an interlocal agreement between Rutherford County, the cities of Murfreesboro and Laverne, and the town of Smyrna, Tennessee, for the 2009 Justice Assistance Grant Recovery Program Award. You'll see in the resolution the amounts that the four governmental entities would receive is spelled out, as is the fact that the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office would be administering the grant and receiving a 5% of the award for those administrative costs. And the purpose of the resolution is to authorize Lieutenant James Martin of the Sheriff's Department to make the online application for the grant funds and to authorize entry into the interlocal agreement, which is attached to the resolution. It's being presented to you at this time because there had been some discussion and sorting out what the figures would be, and we want to be sure that we meet all of the deadlines for making the online application to receive these funds. The city's share after the administrative fee is withheld would be $191,983.12, and that money would need to be used between October 1st, 2008 and September 30th of 2012, and that would be money as to which there would be no city match. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions to Ms. McGannon? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye. Any other business to come before the council from staff or from the council members? Any announcements, comments? I better close it quick. We stand adjourned.
Say them quick.